Welcome to the third and final episode in a Legendarium series called Little Ice Age Great Famine. In part 3, we will talk about how another summer of torrential rainstorms led to the devastation of livestock in Europe, followed by the deaths of as many as 8 million people from starvation. By April 1316, Europe faced its most dire famine in living memory. Public order began to break down. In Wakefield, England, a man named Adam Bray had his son John arrested for stealing a bushel of oats from the family farm. Dozens of other villages saw violent struggles over gleaning rights. Traditionally, the poorest had the right to gather or glean leavings from harvested fields. Now even wealthy peasants went on their knees in the mud to search for a stray ear of wheat. Once they gleaned the fields, peasants took up clubs and pikes to seize food by force. Farmers living on the coast began taking trade cogs to plunder their cargoes. As if to worsen matters further, a fresh deluge came in May and June 1316. Some areas saw rain so heavy that it flattened grain against the ground as if ironed flat. Many more people perished from being drowned in the deluge. Indeed, after the rain stopped, people found emaciated bodies moldering in half-ruined cottages, corpses floating face down in flooded fields, and dead men half-buried in mudslides. This rain brought yet another problem, animal disease. While some livestock died from anthrax and liver fluke, most died from rinderpest. This disease caused cattle and sheep to discharge from the nose, mouth, and eyes. They suffered from violent diarrhea and bleated in pain as they tried to relieve themselves in the fields. The records from Ramsey Abbey in England show just how devastating the effect of rinderpest could be. In one manor, only 6 of 48 animals survived, while in another, the number of cows went from 45 to 2. As animals died in terrible numbers, Europe's peasantry lost yet another source of meat and milk. As hunger set in, people began eating moldy wheat, which contained a fungus that caused a disease called St. Anthony's fire. This illness caused painful spasms and interrupted the blood flow, which in turn caused gangrene. As the disease progressed, the victim's arms and legs blackened, rot away, and finally fell off. Before the victims died, they endured violent hallucinations. Victims of St. Anthony's fire usually died, but many others became demented from niacin deficiency or were blinded by vitamin A loss. Still others perished from starvation, which caused brown and brittle skin, the quick growth of facial hair, and finally extreme lethargy as the victims slowly gave up. Some stories told of babbling men wandering here and there, always searching for food. From time to time, they collapsed from hunger. Finally, they reached a point where they simply could not get up again and waited to die. These torrential rainstorms left farmland so poor that it could no longer support the yields typical of medieval farming. In the 13th century, during the medieval warm period, one could harvest as much as 10 bushels of wheat for every bushel sown. During the famine, production fell between 1/3 to 1/2. Some peasant communities across Europe were simply abandoned, especially in Ireland and the Lübeck region of northern Germany. Severe flooding left these areas unable to support agriculture. Coastal areas in the Netherlands also saw large-scale depopulation as the flooding forced people to find new homes. In the following years, many chroniclers wrote of roaming bands of landless peasants who came to cities looking for work or food. Meanwhile, the landowners of medieval Europe, the monarchs, nobles, and church, saw the value of their estates collapse. They sold off lands, often at much reduced prices. Many others needed loans just to survive. Some of the smaller monasteries and nunneries closed up, while larger institutions like Canterbury Cathedral Priory sold relics to wealthy pilgrims to raise cash. To their credit, the rich of medieval Europe founded many hospitals and hospices to provide housing and a little food to the thousands living on the road. The extreme rainstorms of 1315 and 1316 would continue into 1317. As the cold, wet weather continued, the famine reached its height in the spring of 1317. That year, storms washed away not only the newly planted grain, which was already scarce because the farmers had begun eating their seed corn to survive, but also topsoil and dikes. Finally, in the summer of 1317, the rain stopped. Yet the food supply would not recover until 1322, and the famine had still caused immense death and suffering. The Great Famine struck the British Isles, France, the Low Countries, most of Germany, parts of Poland, and Austria. In total, it affected an area covering 400,000 square miles, home to an estimated population of 30 million. By the time that the Great Famine finally ended, as many as 8 million of those people, or 1/8 of Europe's population, had died. Yet the most disastrous legacy of the Great Famine would come 20 years later. While 7/8 of Europe survived the famine, those who were children during those foodless years tended to be sickly and weak. When the Black Death came in 1347, its impact upon Europe would be even more devastating. That wraps things up for this installment of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.